I have a very special guest today. Chris Peters from Flow Sports is coming on, and I'm really excited to talk to you because you are like somebody that I've always looked up to, really good role model of the community. So thank you so much for coming on.
Wow, geez, I appreciate that. It's an honor to talk to the prospect Don. I mean, the Don of all prospects. So, yeah, no, I appreciate the intro, and it's good to be with you.
When I actually decided to be the prospect Don, I did it because my last name was Donati. I actually didn't know what the Don meant, so I had to watch the Godfather movies. I didn't even
Okay,
know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, see, yeah. So you've given yourself a lofty title, so now you got to live
Yeah.
up to it. That's all. No pressure, no pressure.
No, not at all. But yeah, so I wanted to talk to you about the Hlinka Gretzky Cup a little bit. I know that it was kind of like a little bit of a shock that I think USA won it, like in my mind. But what were your thoughts going into the tournament? And did you think that USA was going to be in contention?
Yeah, it's always tough to know. I think with the summer tournaments, anything can happen. And the thing is that the U.S. is usually working from a bit of a deficit in terms of depth because they're not using the NTDP players. So, they've net really since it's been the Hlinka Gretzky Cup or even the Ivan Hlinka Memorial Tournament, they hadn't won it. And really hadn't in a lot of years hadn't come terribly close. I think they've made the final a few times, but since the tournament was what it was, that not having that depth, it usually puts them at a disadvantage for competitiveness. And so my thought really wasn't about the U.S. so much as it was that I thought Canada was going to roll over everybody with the team that they had, especially having a number of players that played at the under 18 World Championship last year, and having the decor that they do with Keaton Verhoff and Landon Dupont and all these great players. But and I think the other thing too is that we've all been kind of talking about this as being another somewhat down year for the U.S. as last year was in the draft as well. And so would that secondary team be able to compete? And what it turns out is that yes, they could, and they beat Canada in the semifinal. That was the first win over Canada in over 20 years in the tournament. And then they beat Sweden, who they lost to earlier in the tournament, and found a way to win this thing for the first time. So it was a huge surprise to me. And yes, I'd say they always come in as an underdog to this tournament. Really, everywhere else, USA is pretty much on an equal playing field for the most part. This is not the case in this tournament. But it's also August, and so you try not to read too much into it and things like that. But I think the fact that it hadn't ever happened before, and that Canadian team looked so loaded in comparison to everyone else, it's a big surprise, and it's a great thing for USA Hockey, and I think it's a great thing for those players. Most importantly, they hear it all the time. It's the B squad. It's they're not going to be as competitive, and then they were. So really great credit to those players.
Yeah, and like the rankings, I think I did the math and there was like 10 top 30 prospects for Canada. And I think the first one was Jack Hextall at 42, I believe, on NHL Tankathon. But I was like really surprised that they pulled it out. Was there a player or a couple players that kind of surprised you, especially during that tournament, and think that they helped their draft stock at least at this point?
Yeah, well, I guys that weren't necessarily like both Hextall and Blake Solidsky were guys I was very aware of in terms of the way that they played in the USHL last year. Wasn't as familiar with guys like Calder Varga, Harper Levi, who's not even draft eligible until 27. Like different players or Levi Harper. Did I do that wrong? I've been doing that all week. He's got two last names. I can't. How do I do it? I don't know. But like Nikita Klepov, familiar with him, wasn't necessarily sure how big of a role he was going to play. Scored a huge goal in the gold medal game. And so there were a lot of those guys where it's like I'm not really sure what to make of them. Also, the fact that they had their goaltending, you never really quite know. There was a year where they had Dustin Wolf as their goalie, but there have been a lot of other years where there wasn't necessarily the goaltending depth. They got the goaltending that they needed, so that was really interesting as well. And I give a huge amount of credit to all those players that did it. And it is Levi Harper. I think I did say Harper Levi, but I'm saying it right now. 4 goals for him in the tournament. And this is a guy that was playing at
Yeah.
Shattuck last year, a Florida native, going to the OHL. I didn't have a book on him at all. And so to see a guy like that step up and make the plays that he did, that was really impressive to me. But yeah, Klepov getting 6 points in the tournament, having that big goal in the finale, and just the different things that these guys were able to do to make their names. I mean, I think like certainly Zelensky and Hextall are more firmly in the mix for probably going maybe a little bit higher than they were originally,
Mhm.
or at least originally believed to. But I think we're going to see a lot more from these players over the course of the season. What a springboard it is for them to go into their draft season with this kind of momentum.
Yeah, and I actually did the same thing with Levi Harper as well. I called him Harper today on a live stream because I kind of got mixed up with it. But yeah, I totally get that. And
I
one
do that
player,
every time.
yeah, sometimes with the pronunciations that I'm in my head a little bit. I have to like watch videos like Vaslav Nestrasil. I watched like 3 lockdown prospect videos from Sebastian High because I couldn't get the pronunciation right, and he told me he got the pronunciation wrong too. So we both got it wrong. But can you talk to me about like I saw you and Cam Robinson on your podcast, and it's an incredible podcast, so definitely check it out. But I saw Keaton Verhoff and Gavin McKenna, who would go number one, and I just wanted your thoughts on this. Like, is there like a percentage of in your mind, like what percentage Verhoff could go number one at this point?
I think it's low, and I think the reason that we had the discussion is that basically Frank Saravalli, who I worked with at Daily Faceoff, had a tweet about don't be surprised if Verhoff supplants Gavin McKenna. It was making bold statements and things like that. And while that tweet got ratioed to the moon, what I talked to Cam about was like, hey, like let's actually like break it down. Let's have a serious conversation. It's not trying to drum up drama for the sake of drama. I think there's just a real lack of knowledge about how good Keaton Verhoff really is. And the other thing that's a factor is that Gavin McKenna is a slight build winger who is an incredible offensive talent, but his game away from the puck is okay. Like it's not great. And so with that, and like you think about guys like Macklin Celebrini, who went number one 2 years ago, and you think of just the overall game that he has. You think about the wing that went number one most recently in Uri Slafkovsky, and you say, okay, well, he's got size, strength, this tremendous goal scoring ability. There's a number of factors that led him to be number one. Whether he should have been number one or not remains to be seen. But I think that the real reason that we wanted to have that conversation was not to just drum up controversy. It's more to say, hey, like let's not forget that this player is really good. Now we recorded that in the midst of the Hlinka Gretzky Cup. Now when you're the captain of a team that doesn't finish in the top spot, and you're the number one defenseman, and you're supposed to be the all-world guy, it's not a great start to your season if you're Keaton Verhoff. I still think he's going to be in the mix for the World Junior team, and other things like that. And I just think it's important to know that we're not starting from a position of number one being completely out of reach. I think when Celebrini went number one, we didn't think for a second at any point that year that anyone was going to catch him. And as of right now, it's all about Gavin McKenna at number one. And it should be. Based on all the evidence that we have, it should be. But I'm just saying, like, what we wanted to say is, hey, let's not put the cart before the horse on this discussion when we have a guy that could be a number one defenseman. And then we also had the debate later, who would you rather take, Matthew Schaefer or Keaton Verhoff? And if you go off of their 16U seasons, or their U17 seasons rather, Verhoff's was impressive. Maybe more impressive. He had 21 goals. He's a little more. He was more offensively put together at a younger age and is bigger. And I think the skating is very good. So there's a lot of these factors. So it's like would Keaton Verhoff in a 1-to-1 against Matthew Schaefer? Now Schaefer didn't play a full season, so he's not getting that full advantage this year. You'd say, well, there's at least a discussion to be had there between those two players as well.
Yeah, under Frank Saravalli's tweet, I actually posted like the D-1 seasons of Verhoff and Matthew Schaefer. And Matthew Schaefer, the knock on him was his offensive ability that year. And then the next season with Erie, he absolutely went off. But also, Verhoff is a right-handed defenseman, which usually go a little
Yeah.
higher in drafts. 6'4", plays like a fourth forward out there. So I do believe that there is some level of intrigue at number one based on what team goes. Like if the Sharks, they could create the greatest top six of prospects on paper of all time if they take Gavin McKenna. But Verhoff is also right there. So I thought that was interesting. Do you think that like Ivar Stenberg is more polished than Anton was at the same time?
I think more polished. I mean, I think he's coming in with, yes, I would say he is more polished, but again, it's a center versus wing debate. Stenberg plays more on the wing. He's smaller as well. So there's two different things there. What I would say though is that Stenberg had half a point a game in the SHL playoffs last year. You know, Frölunda was better when he was with them than they were without him. And so that is something that, Anton Frondell didn't have that evidence to his name that season. Stenberg is going to come into this year as a late birth date too. So the age wise, he's not that far ahead or behind rather. So that's another factor in it. But I think that his offensive toolkit is more advanced at this point. His competitive drive is at the same level. His skating is probably a bit better. So you have all these different things, but he is smaller. He is a wing. Could he play center? Possibly. I don't know if he's going to. I think that there's a really realistic chance that it's him with Frundell, and potentially Eklund on the top line for Sweden, which would make for a very formidable top line, as could compete with anybody at the World Juniors this year. But I think Stenberg for me right now, there's subtle differences, but he's still very much like on my first list, he was number 3. So and I think that's probably where he'll start my early season list as well, and my way too early list. But based on what I saw, even at the World Junior Summer Showcase, like, okay, this guy's dialed in, he's ready to go. He'll probably be on Frölunda's team all year, possibly playing top 6 all year. And then I would expect him to be a major factor at the World Juniors as well.
I did want to talk to you about like Belcheck, Lawrence, and Preston, and also Vigo, but because he put up incredible numbers, but they're all different players. Can you tell me a little bit about like that range, even Ryan Robrick, but like those guys, is it like a much stronger class in 2025 in this range here at this point?
It's tough to say. I think it's too early to say. Like, well, we try to make those bigger proclamations early, and I think sometimes it influences how we feel about the class. What I will say is that the early indications are that that there's a chance for it to be a little bit more robust than maybe the top 6, 7, 8 this year. Certainly there's going to be more defensemen in the fold. There's going to be more more skill, more size, different things. Like, last year's class was huge, but then you have Belchets and Rubrak, and they're massive humans and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but, in terms of that range and like, I think it's going to be interesting to watch Vigo Bjork's draft stock this year, because he does not have the size. He does not have the skating at the size either to necessarily say this guy's absolutely going to be a top 10 pick. But he did something that no one has ever done before in the way that he produced last season as a 16-year-old at the top U20 level in Sweden. And if he gets minutes at the SHL level and he's able to prove himself further, because he's already dominated the U20 ranks, that will only help him as he moves forward. I did ask him at the summer showcase if he had any thoughts of coming to North America, and he said he's focused on Djurgården. He's wants to be there. But, because I was also like thinking, he's going to be kind of a tweener between pro and that. So like, he'll be one to watch. But I think like Belchets, Rubrak, Mathis Preston, who you mentioned, different players like that. And then of course, Tynan Lawrence, those guys really talented. I think there's still questions about every single one of them. I think we saw Belchets. He was a little hit and miss, but he's got that size. He's got the skating. He's got skill. He's got a lot of those things. Rubrek, he's got the size factor. Preston has just tremendous skill. Tynan Lawrence is kind of an all-around player and really mature. So I think that there's a lot to be figured out. There's going to be a lot of players that push themselves into that conversation this year. But I think in general, the top 5, top 10 of this draft is going to be quite talented. I'm really looking forward to seeing how everybody kind of progresses this year. But there's a lot to look forward to in this class.
And when you like began scouting and just were evaluating classes, what was like your favorite draft class of all time that you remember?
Oh yeah, that's actually easy. So like in the years I started, my first list came out with the 2013 draft. I'm pretty sure when it was at
Hmm.
CBS Sports. And you can feel free to look that up and make fun of me for it. I was young and I didn't know what I didn't know that back then. And so those making mistakes is actually how you learn. But my favorite class that I ever did was the 2019 class, which was the Jack Hughes class, the 2001 birth year with USA, and then also having some of these young players that matriculated in that class. I was at ESPN at the time. I had, it was from a resource standpoint, from an ability to go see things, I was able to kind of see the entire season play out from, the Hlinka Gretzky Cup that year, where USA actually, they beat Canada that year, but they didn't officially because there was no video replay that showed, I think it was Dylan Cousins scored the game tying goal about a half second too late. And but that team had Dustin Wolf. It had Nick Robertson, Arthur Kaliev, a number of other players that made an impact and were highly drafted players. So the 2019 class was the class that I felt like I knew had the best book on, had the best experience. It was a very fun class. That U18 team for USA with Matt Boldy and Trevor Zegras and Cole Caulfield and Cam York and Alex Vlasic and Spencer Knight and that not to
Hmm.
mention Jack Hughes. Like that was one of the better American classes that we've seen as well. So because of the totality of the experience and just I was able to zone in on that class so much more. That's always been my favorite draft to cover.
During that draft, the Hawks had the third pick and took Kirby Doc, but everyone thought they were taking Bowen Byram, and I actually cried during the draft because they took Kirby Doc. And my friends, we were all like in college, but they were like, "What are you doing? You don't even know who these players are." And I was like, "Dude, Kirby Doc was like, I don't know. I was just upset." And then Turcotte was also the Chicago guy, so everyone kind of thought he was going to go there. But that was a good draft. Yeah, I think the year after, I think it was when the lottery ball fell for the Rangers, and everyone thought it was like a heavy ball. I thought that was pretty funny too. But
That was a good one.
yeah, what was I just want to like say like what is the best player like in your opinion that you scouted that wasn't highly regarded but you kind of like found first? Is there like a
Oh,
playlist?
first, if I found first, that's the thing. I think it's harder. I think it's hard to ever like actually find somebody. Um, I remember the one thing about that 2019 draft. I do remember seeing Matt Boldy for the first time and being like, why aren't we talking about this guy as a potential top guy in this group? Because he wasn't Zegras and Caulfield and Hughes were getting all the pub. And they deserved it. I mean, they were putting up the numbers and everything. But I saw Boldy the first time I think I saw him live was at that U17 team played. They actually, I'm pretty sure they won the division in the USHL that year. Like their U17 and U18 team were actually dominant at the USHL level, and they won their division. And so they ended up playing the Chicago Steel in the playoffs, and I went to go see that team, and Boldy was all over the ice, just like he was. And I remember talking to the coaches and everything, and like John Robleski was the coach at the time, and I worked with him at the NTDP years prior. And he's like, I'm telling you, man, he's like, he is the new Hossa. He's gonna be Hossa.
Wow.
And while I don't know that Matt's gonna be Hossa, he's he's an Olympian. I'll tell you that much. He's gonna be on the Olympic team, and he's gonna be a very important piece for USA Hockey going forward. But that was a guy where it was like I felt like he got overlooked. And I think on my final list he was somewhere around 7. And so I still underrated him at times because I think if you do that redraft, he's going to go a lot higher.
Mhm.
So yeah, but that was a guy where I was like definitely like, oh, this guy's a guy. And I also was pretty proud that year of having Alex Vlasic as a first rounder. He wasn't the kind of guy that had the numbers, but you could just see with his size and his mobility, that he was going to play for a long time in the NHL. And I think ultimately, like I know last year was a bit of a down year. I think he's going to be a very important player for Chicago for many years to come.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like incredible contract that he's on, 4.6 for I think 4 or 5 more years, but his he's only gotten better, and I think he was like the top defenseman on the Blackhawks. I know Sam Rinzel and Artem Levshunov came up, but I wanted to talk a little bit about those guys as well. Can you kind of give me like the rundown in your opinion of like Sam Rinzel, and do you think he would kind of be in that top 10 range of a redraft of 2022, you think?
I think it's a little early to put him in that category. He's definitely improved dramatically from the years since the draft. I think when the Blackhawks picked him, and similar to the situation where they picked Mason West this year,
Hmm.
they picked a project on purpose. Like they know they're like, this is not a guy that is a sure thing. And they knew it and they did it anyway. But they said, well, here's a 6'6" defenseman that moves incredibly well, doesn't quite have the hockey sense yet, but he's only mostly played at the high school level, gets that extra year of development in the USHL, goes and gets the extra years of development with the Minnesota Gophers, becomes one of the best defensemen in the country, immediately transitions into the NHL and makes an impact. I think that he has exceeded expectations, my expectations for where he was going to be. And he was a player that I had listed as a first round draft prospect that year. I liked him a lot. I thought that the upside was worth taking a chance on. But there was a lot of noise about like, is this guy going to compete for you? Is he going to do what you need to do? Is he hard enough? Is he competitive enough? And I think what we've seen over the years is, yeah, not only is he competitive, he is going to be impactful. And so I wouldn't necessarily put him in the top 10 of a redraft. I'd have to think about it a lot more to see where he goes, but he's still very much a first rounder. And he's a guy that I think that Chicago is going to be very happy that they took a chance on. Long way to go to find out if the same story is going to be true of Mason West this year, which is an even bigger risk being taken by Chicago on that pick.
Yeah.
But the Rinzel pick at the time, there were a lot of people scratching their head. But it was one of those where I was like, you could see the vision. They let him develop at his own pace. It has paid off. I think he'll play good minutes for them this year. And it'll be interesting to see kind of how the defense with Levshunov and Rinzel. What does that mean for Korchinski? What does that mean for some of these other guys? Because I think that the upside that you're seeing in Levshunov and Rinzel is such that there's great potential there.
And I wanted to ask like your opinion on Celebrini versus Bedard because there's been this like hot topic. If you were starting out a team, who do you think you would build around?
I mean, I would pick Celebrini. I've been
Hmm.
saying that for the last little while. During his draft year, I was trying to say, hey, like everybody, I know everyone was all about Bedard last year, and there really wasn't any argument about what he was. He scored 72 goals in his draft season. I mean, like there shouldn't have been. But don't sleep on how good Celebrini is because the difference between Celebrini and Bedard is his game away from the puck is growing. Celebrini's is already there.
Hmm.
And so I think he's one of the very best all around forwards to come through the draft since probably Crosby because he does everything well. There's not a thing that Macklin Celebrini does that I view as a weakness in his game. He competes. He's hard on pucks. He defends. He's smart. He can score. He has skill. He has speed. The only thing, maybe the only weakness is that he's not 6'2". He's like 5'11", 6 foot.
Yeah.
Like oh well. So to me the thing about Bedard is he has the higher offensive ceiling, but I think that the way like you look at could the Blackhawks have won all of the championships with Patrick Kane and not Jonathan Taves? And that's the
I
thing for
no.
me is yeah, no, probably not.
No.
You needed both of them. Bedard is going to need somebody to be that kind of that Celebrini esque player, the Jonathan Taves esque player. I view them very similarly, where Bedard is is the he's going to score you 100 points, and Celebrini might score 75,
Hmm.
but he's might win a few Selkies before it's all over too. So the thing is that you know the thing is that you building around either of them is a benefit. I think if you're building around players of that caliber, that to me is the most important thing, is that you support those players, because having one of them puts you a step up from a lot of
Hmm.
other rebuilding teams. But if you had to pick between the two of them, you're just getting a little bit more bang for your buck with Celebrini, because he's also going to be your tough matchup center. He can play on your PK. He can do all these other things that are going to help you. And I think that Bedard has further to go in those elements of the game. Not to say that he can't and won't get there. Like I said, offensive ceiling is higher, but I just think that, to me, Celebrini being the more complete player, that's the guy that I would probably feel most comfortable building around.
And do you think Gavin McKenna will be in that tier of Bedard and Celebrini?
I don't think so. I don't. I think he's going to get close.
Mhm.
I think that for me, his game away from the puck is still not where it needs to be. He's also a winger, so it's not as critical. But like, the thing is, like I said, if you could he be the Patrick Kane to somebody's Jonathan Taves or something of that nature? Heck yeah. Like, I mean, I think they're going to be there. I think he's going to do a lot of good at the collegiate level this year. I don't know if he's going to dominate like a lot of people think he will. I think it's a little bit tougher to do that, and so the games will be tighter. He's going to have more eyes on him. He's going to have a different structure that he's going to have to compete against. More structured and older, more experienced players in college hockey. So while I think he's probably going to be one of the best players in the country, I don't necessarily think that he's going to win the Hobie Baker. Like everybody's
Mhm.
like, well, he's obviously going to win the. It's really hard. Um, and so but I do think that the thing about McKenna is there's so many things about him that are special. And you look at his season, and it was a special season, and to score as consistently as he does, to score as creatively as he does, to be this incredible playmaker. That's the other thing, is like, will he have the weapons around him at Penn State to convert on some of these opportunities? I think he will, but it's just, like he's going into a bit of a different environment. So I'm excited to see the transition. I'm excited to see what he does, and I'm really excited to see, what the next steps are for him, because he's such an incredible talent. But I think you look at both Bedard and Celebrini as centers, and especially Celebrini as a more like a complete center. I see them as more valuable in general, than
Mhm.
what we've seen from McKenna so far.
And I wanted to get your opinion on ranking Matthew Schaefer, Keaton Verhoff, and Landon DuPont if you can. I know it's early and they're completely different draft years, but if you could with that defense, who do you think would probably be your number one pick there?
Boy, I mean, I'm gonna say DuPont.
Mhm.
I do think that as I look at Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar, Lane Hudson now as well, like, do I think that the more likely guy to be a long-term number one is Verhoff? I do, but I think DuPont gives you this explosivity, this kind of um, incredible intelligence, incredible skating ability, the things that you need to be, a smaller than average defenseman, but also still play the big minutes. I think he can change the dynamic of a game. And I think more teams are looking and saying, we need to have this kind of player.
Mhm.
Like Verhoff could be like at the top of his game, he could be Victor Hedman. Like and if you get that, then that's an amazing thing. And you get it in a right shot defenseman with that
Yeah.
size. But I just think, like, I look at DuPont and I see what he's done at his age, and it's unprecedented. No one's really ever seen this, not at the WHL level. Um, so he's got a lot further to go, right? He's got plenty more runway. We're seeing Keaton Verhoff take this really dramatic step. And I would imagine we're going to see DuPont take a similar step where he's going into college hockey for his draft year, possibly even North Dakota. Who knows? You never know really at this point
Yeah.
where any of these guys are going. Um, but I do think there's a lot on the line for those guys. But I think DuPont's upside the offensive know-how, the incredible hockey sense, and the incredible skating ability. I just think that that's a player that we're going to be talking about for a real long time.
Yeah, and players that you don't know where they're going. Adam Valentini kind of just shook up the prospecting world by not going to his commitment, which was the Rangers or the Kitchener Rangers, going to the University of Minnesota, which great program there. The top
Michigan.
six is, yeah, Michigan, sorry. Talking about Renzel all the time. But can you tell me about like where you see that fit in University of Michigan, as well as the decision that kind of shook the world a little?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'll say that. I think that so Valentini played for the Chicago Steel last year, and was fine. He played really well. I think there was a lot of expectation on him. There was a lot of excitement about him. But you look at kind of the output. Wasn't an all rookie selection, wasn't, no signifiers of, that kind of like big step forward. Went to the Hlinka Gretzky Cup and he was very good. I don't know that you would say he was one of Canada's best players. He had 4 points at the start of the tournament and then none the rest in some of the toughest games that they played. I think that you look at jumping to college, and so he was going to go to Kitchener, and I thought Kitchener was, for one, very well set up to be a very competitive team this year, still are, and to be that kind of step for him that he would be a premier player at the OHL level, and then Michigan had a spot available, and I'm sure that spot was being held for the option of another high profile CHL to NHL or CHL to NCAA commitment, maybe somebody that was drafted recently, maybe somebody that ended up at another program. And so I think if you're asking a player to accelerate and move up a level and you're doing it based on need, it is the wrong decision. If you are doing it because this is going to benefit your team and the player, then it's the right decision. And you didn't have to do it out of need. There is nothing in Adam Valentini's profile to me that suggests that he's ready for this jump. So it's a risk on his part. And I respect it. Like last year, I said the same things about Cullen Potter. Cullen Potter still ended up going in the first round. I thought that he was a good college player. He handled the transition and he got better as the year went on. I don't think that but then you look at like Celebrini and he's a dominant college player. Maybe that's not the right comparison to make. Obviously Keaton Verhoff, you look at him, the size, the different things, he's at the same age, accelerating into college a year early. Mm-hmm. And now you're doing it with Valentini. So doesn't have the same size profile. I think it's very, very risky on his part to take this jump right now. And it's kind of funny. I was looking back. I was reminded of this. Very late July of 2011, the University of Michigan was getting prepared to welcome a highly touted recruit out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the National Team Development Program. That was John Gibson. They signed him on July 27th of 2011, and he went to the Kitchener Rangers. He was supposed to go to the University of Michigan.
Wow.
All this and it's a different staff, so they're not playing the long revenge game here or anything like that. But it's kind of the tables have turned suddenly, and it puts the team in a bad position, and But purely from a developmental perspective, Anthony, the way that I view this is it is risky. Mm-hmm. I don't think that he's ready for that step. I don't think that Michigan has the support in front. Like they have the coaching. He's going to get better. It's going to pressure him, but they're a really young team already. And to throw another young player into this mix, like I don't think Michigan is going to compete this year, like for a Big Ten title, for Frozen Four. I don't know if they'll make the NCAA tournament. They've got good pieces, but they're freshman pieces, and they're, mm-hmm. You do have some guys. They're they're not built the way that college teams have been built to compete for national titles in recent years. They're built as a very skilled, fast, young team, and we'll see if that works out. I think it's risky. I'm intrigued to see how it works out. I think obviously for the Kitchener Rangers, you're really devastated. I think if you're the Chicago Steel, you're feeling, maybe less bad that he's not going to the OHL. But at the same time, I still think he's a junior hockey player. I think from where he is right now to where he has to be an impactful freshman. And I'm talking impactful. I'm not saying like he can be a guy. Like he's definitely skilled enough to be on the roster. But I don't know if he can be an impactful addition to that roster. And that's where if I'm a player accelerating, I would want to be a guy that's going to be a top 4 defenseman or a top 6 forward. I don't see any path for him to be either, a top 6 forward on this roster. So it's an interesting move, to say the least.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked to see that. I think a lot of people were. I know there was talk about this, but I'm not sure if it was the end all be all. But like teams were worried about Malcolm Spence going to Michigan after his draft year, and that might have been why he slept a little. I thought he was a first round pick, but so it is interesting that Adam Valentini did go that route. But I wanted to ask you one more about
Sure.
Joe Aginla, because Joe Aginla is somebody that kind of had a rough WHL last year. I think he had 16 points, and he was somebody that was talked about being one of the best Aginla brothers. So can you talk to me about him and like what you want to see out of him this year to try to get back in the first round talk?
I think it's always tough. Like for the same, like Tej had kind of an up and down little bit there too, but he performed better. I mean, like expectations are always difficult. He's got the unfortunate additional burden of having a Hall of Fame father that, it has a lot of this. And, his sister Jade is also a very good college hockey player on the women's side. And you've got obviously Tej who's now hopefully back to health and going to be able to play this whole season. I think for Joe, like he's not a big guy, he's got a lot to prove. But I'm not really worried. Like, a lot of these guys, he's an August birthday. He was really young for the WHL last year. It's a tough league on a young player. And, he was playing for Edmonton and, it wasn't necessarily going to be the biggest and best year for that group. And when you're also playing as a rookie, it's, you're trying to figure out things. I think the excitement that was built in his like first little go as a U15 or a 15U when he popped in there for the first time and he had some success. You have to be careful with expectations. So for him, it's got to be like, don't think about the expectations, just go and play. Didn't make the Hlinka team, obviously didn't, he's kind of now a little forgotten, I guess, in the mix, but I don't think, for him, it's always tough to say. And I didn't watch him a ton last year, so I can't really speak to where he's at in his development right now. But I do know that like he's got to just go play and we'll see where it goes from there. But, he's in the right spot. He's got time and, he may end up being one of those players. Like I think Tej would have been a great candidate for going to the college route after playing in the CHL for 2 years or 3 years or whatever. Joe could be the same thing. So we'll see where that all ends up.
I just want to thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome. If you've ever seen Hot Ones, this is your time. There's a camera here, here, and here. It's the middle one. You can tell everybody where they can find you, what you guys got going on at Flow Sports, and anything else.
Yeah, so it's really exciting. Obviously the junior hockey season is going to be starting here in about a month on Flow Hockey. We've got the USHL, the QMJHL. We've got a lot of new things coming up, some big announcements down the road here as well about future coverage. And we're going to be covering the NHL draft as we always do, the World Juniors, a lot of the things that are beneath the NHL. And then we also have we're the streaming home of the AHL and the ECHL. So basically a good chunk of the developmental ladder that these players are climbing, the players that we talk about on prospect shows, they all live on Flow. So come check it out. We're really excited about the season that we have coming up. Definitely recommend getting an annual subscription. It helps you save some money, and you'll get access to basically, I think we had 21,000 hockey games on last year. You don't have to watch all of them, but you can watch the ones that you want. So there's a lot on there. I'm really excited about that future and what we're doing. So yeah, flowhockey.tv is where to find all of that, and also to subscribe there, and you'll see all of our work and everything on there on the Flow Hockey platforms.
I challenge anyone to watch 21,000 hockey games on Flow this year. That's a good challenge. It's a
That is a
fantasy
good
punishment.
challenge.
It's a
That
great,
is that,
great
that,
challenge.
that let's do it. Let's do it. Let's get somebody. Yeah, could be even more this year. Who knows?
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. This is a great time. Um, I love you and Cam Robinson's podcast that's sponsored by Pistachio, I think. But yeah, that's awesome.
Used to
I love
be.
pistachios. Used to be. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. This was great.
Yay,
Bye,
my
everybody.
pleasure. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Really appreciate it.